Episode 9. Hello, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff, and I'll be your host as we listen to eyewitness encounters involving one of the most terrifying cryptids, Dogmen. Our guest tonight is Mark Reynolds. Mark happens to live in one of the true hotspots in the U.S. for Dogman activity. Consequently, over the years, he's had several encounters with them. Mark's here tonight to share the details of those encounters with you. Mark, welcome to Dogman Encounters Radio. Thanks so much for coming.
It's my pleasure to share my experiences and a little bit of knowledge that I have with the listeners.
How old were you when you had your first Dogman encounter?
I would say that my first Dogman encounter, I was probably 35 at the time.
What chain of events set the table for this encounter to occur?
Myself and a friend, we had decided that we were going to camp out on a hunting lease during the month of June, basically camp out at their hunting camp and get some relaxation time in, do a little riding and looking around. Basically, with that evening, we packed up our gear. We went out to the campsite and rode in on four-wheelers and basically got everything set up for that evening. It was fairly late in the evening. It didn't take long for it to get dark. So we were just kind of hanging out. We built a fire. We had gone and we brought some hot dogs with us, and we were cooking them on the open fire, just kind of hanging out. My friend decided that he wanted to go on a four-wheeler ride. At that time, it had already gotten dark. I was like, cool, let's go, So we set off across the property, and we were riding down some pretty well-established trails. We got to this one area, being that I had only been on the property a couple of times, I wasn't real sure where exactly I was at the moment, but we were going down this, not a real steep incline, but a steady incline, and when it bottomed out, it went up another incline. When I got to the bottom of the incline, he was about halfway up the other side. All of a sudden, he turned and went off to the left-hand side into the bushes, and I was like, what in the world is he doing that for? Well, he must know where he's going, because I couldn't see whether there was a trail or not. When he turned, I remember it was kind of funny. It was like he turned kind of swiftly and was like he was going down a trailway. It just, all of a sudden he stopped. And as I was coming up, I realized that he had ran onto a dirt mound and got stuck. After I realized that, I was like, what is he doing? I turned back my focus back to the trail, and up at the top of the trail, on the top of the hill, I could see a pair of eyes. These eyes were really, really large. They were amber in color, and to me, they very much resembled the eyes of a canine, or the closest thing that I've seen that matched them would be probably the eyes of a wolf. It was not directly in the line of sight of my headlights, but it was close enough that I could see the eyes light up. Well, when I saw them, my first thought was that I needed to turn the focus of the lights onto the creature to try to see it. When I turned, it was like one swift movement, the eyes were like standing, like it was facing directly towards me, and then in the light that I had, I saw it turn its head, and it just in one swift movement exited the trailway into the woods. So I pulled up behind my friend, and I asked him, I said, "What in the world are you doing?" And he was like, "Oh, I thought there was a trail here, and I guess I was wrong because I'm stuck." So I got off, and I helped him push his four-wheeler off of this dirt mound. And I was kind of nervous, and I asked him, I said, "Did you see those eyes at the top of the hill?" And he was like, "No, man, what are you talking about?" And he was, to me, he was acting like he was in a state of denial. It was like he saw them, but, and it freaked him out at first, but then he just kind of was trying to put it out of his mind, in me questioning him about it. After that, we got it unstuck. We rode back, actually, to the camp. And we were sitting there. We had been back maybe 30 or so minutes. We started hearing coyotes in different areas around the campsite, and it seemed like they were moving. When the coyotes got kind of up in a position where it seemed like they were away from the camp but directly behind it, I told him, I said, "Look, we need to go." He was like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" I was like, "No." I was like, "I don't know. I just got a bad feeling. We need to go." And so we packed up everything, and we went back to his house and basically just spent the night there. Interesting thing about that particular area, on another occasion, we had gone, well, actually, there were two other occasions where I had seen, let's see, one, I'm trying to remember. There was one other occasion that I had seen that same creature while we were riding. But it was sometime later, 2 or 3 weeks, we had gone riding during the daytime. In the area that we were in, I was not very familiar with it. Basically, what happened, we were riding pretty fast up and down these hills, and we came to this spot where there was this big hill, and it went down, and the trail curved in an S. When it curved through a little small patch of woods. Basically, when he hit that, he was out of my sight, and I was still coming down the hill. Well, when I got to the bottom of the hill, I look over to my left, and there's this creature. He's down on one knee, and he has his arm out like he's picking up something off of the ground. Jet black. Scary jet black. I mean, when I looked at this thing, it was just like a hole. I don't know how to describe it. It was so black that it was like, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. It was, when I saw it, I was kind of slowed down a little bit, and I was looking at it, and I was like, thinking to myself, I was like, should I stop and see what this is, or should I keep going? I was thinking to myself, I was like, well, I don't know where he's at, my friend, so about that time I got hit with this uneasy feeling. I was like, no, I need to keep going, because if that is the same creature that I saw, then, I don't want to do anything to antagonize it or provoke it, so I need to keep going. That's what I did. But that's pretty much my first encounter with one, and then a second encounter with what I believe to be the same creature 2 to 3 weeks later.
When you saw that black dogman during the day that was crouched down and appeared to be picking something up off the ground, how close was it to you?
It was within 30 yards.
Too close for comfort.
That's why basically what I did when I hit the bottom of that incline, I just kind of eased it off the gas a little bit, and I was looking at it, and I was like, man, that thing is black. And then I was like, you know how when you look at something, you say, well, what in the world is it? It's got to be a stump. And then, when I looked at it, the sheer blackness to it, it just did not fit in the woods.
That had to be one heck of a sight to see, especially since that was the first one that you had seen in full daylight. The one when you saw, like you said, you think you saw it before that one night, but obviously that can't compare to seeing it 30 yards away in the daytime. Wow. Before you had that first encounter that night, Mark, what was your mindset with regards to the possibility of dogmen or Bigfoot even existing?
Well, a little bit of background on that, on my particular beliefs towards it, and just a little bit of history about myself. I started investigating reports of Bigfoot and strange and unusual creatures shortly after I turned 27. When I was 27, I had a very interesting Bigfoot encounter. That event got me started in my personal inquiry as to what these things are or could be.
It sounds like that Bigfoot encounter you had when you were 27 in a way kind of prepared you for that, in my opinion, scarier encounter you had when you were 35 with the Dogman.
Well, in all honesty, whether it's Bigfoot or Dogman, there is nothing that actually prepares you for that. In my experience, I've researched in several different states, several different people, have been, accompanied me on these research events. I've seen different reactions out of different people. So yeah, it's kind of hard to gauge exactly how you yourself is going to react to one, much less somebody else.
After you had that Dogman encounter in the day where you could see clearly what you were looking at there, did you fall apart, or it sounds like you handled it fairly well?
Yeah, one thing that is kind of interesting about myself in particular is most people, when they encounter these creatures, and don't take what I'm going to say the wrong way, because I am apprehensive around them, but for whatever reason, my fear reaction is just not present with these creatures. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, because if you're not afraid of something, that doesn't mean that something won't cause you harm. Some of the things that I've encountered, like when you walk into an area and you see three 40-foot tall oak trees that are bent together and the tops of them are woven together, when you see that firsthand, several things run through your mind. The first and most obvious being, what is this and why are they doing this, and, or who did this? And it gravitates from that to different questions like, did somebody come in here and do this? Are there tool marks on the trees? Are there tread marks on the hillside? Different things like that. And then when you get past that, then it gravitates to, in order to bend a tree like that, especially one that's 6 to 8 inches in diameter, it has to be immensely strong to do that. And then couple that with rumorings is probably the best way to put it, of people being harmed by creatures. You know, you couple that into the scenario, and it does cause you to be apprehensive. Or it should.
Yeah, anytime you're dealing with something like that, it would only be expected to be apprehensive about it when you're basically looking at a monster. To paint the picture for all of the listeners at home, Mark, can you give the best description you can as far as what that dogman you saw looked like that day?
Well, I'll tell you what. Later on after that, I did have another encounter with a dogman creature that I got a real good look at, and I think that it's probably best to describe that one.
Sure, that sounds good. Before you describe the way that one looked, what were you doing that led to you seeing that one?
Basically, with that encounter, I had gone into an area with a friend. The friend that I went into this area with went with me on the pretext of looking for different types of rocks and artifacts, and real big into fossils and stuff like that. I was going into the area on the pretext of looking for deer tracks, because I am an outdoorsman. Deer tracks, any kind of other tracks, whether they be Bigfoot, Dogman related, with no better time to look for tracks when you're out scouting for deer, especially when you're in an area that does have activity. So basically we went into this area, and to describe the area, it's pretty much an open area, but it does have a ravine that runs through the center of it. And kind of like the open area cuts up into the woods, and it's clear in that whole area. It's really sandy soil, and it doesn't appear that anything aside from field grass likes to grow in it. So what I do is I go in there and I walk up the ravine and look for tracks. Well, when we went in, my friend stopped and was going to look at some rocks in a particular area, and I kept going. So no inclination that there was anything going on, you know, Bigfoot or Dogman related. The only thing was it was late in the evening. I would say probably an hour before dusk. I walked in kind of slow, and I was looking just back and forth, walking in this particular area, and it got to the woods, turned around, and started heading back, and shifted over to another area on the right-hand side, on my right-hand side, that I hadn't walked through. There's a roadway that runs along that edge. And I walked all the way back and got to where my friend was, and when I was almost all the way back, I could hear them. What they were doing was they were trying to break some rocks, and you could hear them hitting rocks together. I didn't pay it any attention. I just, I knew what was going on. I got back, and I was standing there. They were still trying to break these rocks, and out of the blue, I got this feeling that there was something watching me. So I turned around, and I'm looking, and I'm trying to be non-discriminate about it and not be so obvious. Up on the hillside, there are trees, but there are spaces in between the trees where there's like real tall grass and a few bushes. I was scanning the hillside there, and initially when I spotted this creature, what it looked like, I don't know if you're an outdoorsman or not, but if you're ever in the woods and you are looking at a deer, and it's looking at you head on, the white underneath their neck if they're standing behind something or standing there, that's very prevalent. You could see it readily, and basically when I spotted it, I was like, that's a deer. And it was like behind this bush. And I was like, okay. So I was looking at it, and what was weird about it is it never moved. Most of the time with a deer, you're going to get a flicker of the tail, or an ear is going to move, or when a sound comes, they're going to turn their ear or something like that. There was none of that. So I just kind of stood there and I was looking at this thing, halfway expecting it to move, and it never did. So then I'm like trying to figure out what this is. So I said, well, I don't know for sure, so I'm going to take a picture of it. I had a camera, naturally, because when I would go into that area to look for tracks or whatever, I would take a camera to document them in the event that I found any. A lot of people, they report that when there is the presence of electronics or whatever, that Bigfoot can, or whatever, animals, deer, Bigfoot, Dogman, that they can hear it. I can almost validate that, because when I turned that camera on, that Dogman ducked down behind the bush. And when it did, it turned its head slightly, and I could see more of a side profile of its head. When it turned, it ducked down, and naturally, being that I was able to see what it was, my inclination was, okay, it's starting to get late. Where did it go? Because I'm not trying to be Dogman snack or something like that. So I'm like, where did it go? And I was waiting for it to pop up somewhere, or waiting to see movement or something from the bushes or the grass. And basically, when it ducked down behind that bush, it got down on its belly and was crawling on the ground, trying to get away from that spot. I guess because it could tell that I was going to try to take a picture of it. To me, to describe this thing, it wasn't bulky like some of the Bigfoot that you hear about, like 8-9 feet tall. I mean, at the distance I was at, it was a greater distance. I would say probably 50-ish yards, but it had more of a human-like size to it, as far as its height and build and its body structure. The thing that was most prevalent about it, relating to it being a Dogman, was its head. When it turned its head, I could clearly see that it had a muzzled snout. And what I was seeing that I thought was the underside of a deer's neck was actually what it looked like to me. Was it looked like this thing had taken some kind of shale sand or some kind of sand or something, mud or something that was white looking, and it had rubbed it on its snout. I could see when it turned its head just that little bit that, I could see finger marks where it had done that. It almost reminded me of Native American war paint. It's kind of what it reminded me of. When I saw that, I was like, wow. It's unlike anything that I've ever seen, as far as even relating to Bigfoot or anything. But I was just glad that it was crawling off in the other direction. Irregardless of what it was, I mean, you run into something like that, definitely not something you want to mess with. I firmly believe that the Dogman is not your friend, and I'm not just saying that lightly.
Going back to those Dogmen that you saw, I'm getting the impression that the ones that you did see look like what are called Type 3s. You mentioned that the build wasn't nearly as robust as, say, a Bigfoot, but I'm getting the impression that they do have leg structures that are very similar to what a man or a Bigfoot would have, correct?
That is correct. What I like to tell people, if you've ever seen that movie, The American Werewolf in London, imagine the werewolf's head on a human body. And that's kind of what this thing looked like. Very creepy.
That is some creepy stuff. Definitely not something you'd want to run into way out in the middle of nowhere. Now, how long was it between that encounter and your next Dogman encounter?
Between the one that I just related?
That's right.
To the one prior or the next one?
The next one after that one where you saw the Dogman that appeared to have that white coloring sand-type soil that it had rubbed on its chin and throat area.
Well, actually, it wasn't on its chin and throat area. It was like on the top of its nose area, on the top of its muzzle.
Oh, okay.
And to me, it looked like it had its head down at an angle, giving that area more prevalence. You know what I'm saying?
I sure do.
It was weird. I've never seen anything like that. Between the second one and that one, I would say that was at least 2 to 3 years between that. And then what was interesting is after that one, myself and that same friend, we had another encounter with a creature that was a lot bigger and very much, I mean, this thing was the size of a grizzly bear. And it was just huge. But it stayed on all fours during the whole encounter. And that was what was weird about it. It never stood up. But I will tell you this, it was fast.
That's scary.
Yeah, it was so fast when it ran through the first time, I thought it was a deer. That's just how fast it was. And it had to be pretty fast because of its sheer size. You think about it, the size of a grizzly bear. In order for me to think that it was a deer, it had to be moving faster than a deer. With that, me and the friend went out to the roadway to look at the stars. I believe there was supposed to be a meteor shower or something that night. And we walked out there just to see if we could see anything. We're standing there, and the dogs had come out with us. They had a German Shepherd and a Lab, and basically we were just standing there. The dogs were right there with us. I just happened to turn, I guess at the right time, and I saw something run from one side of the road to the other. And keep in mind that on either side of the road, or both sides of the road, there's an open field on both sides. So this thing runs across, and I see it, and I say, oh, well, this was just a deer. I'm not paying it too much mind. And I'm standing there, and we're talking and looking, and I turn back, and I glance down the road again, and this thing is back at the side of the road. Let me tell you what, it was huge. It looked like, the only thing I can, the picture that Alpha Wolf or whatever?
Alpha Dog.
Alpha Dog. You know the picture that he posted on Facebook tonight?
I sure do.
Imagine that on all fours, and that's the shape that this thing had.
Wow, that would be a big one then.
It was huge. It was as big as a grizzly bear. And just kind of stood there for a few seconds, and then the dogs turned and noticed it. And I turned and looked at my friend, and my friend was standing there, and I was like, "Did you see that?" And they were like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Okay, I just wanted to check because, I didn't want to think that I was seeing things." And then turned back around, and the dogs, I guess, had sensed that it was down there, and they took off running, and they ran down to where it was, because when I turned back around, it was gone. They turned and ran down there, and they were sniffing in the general area that it was, and then they just came back. Very, very interesting encounter.
That would get your heartbeat going. Did that Dogman ever give any indications that it might have been planning on showing aggression towards you, or did it just appear and then leave?
Well, my impression was that when it came through the first time, naturally it was coming through pretty fast. It either didn't see us once it got out into the field. It didn't see us, but maybe smelled us, and it came back to investigate. Because when I turned and saw it, it was just standing there looking at us, and I'm like, "What is this thing?" And then I'm thinking, "Man, that's huge." And then I'm thinking, I wonder if I can run, if I can outrun it. And I was thinking, no. But as far as aggression, no. Now, on other occasions, in that same area, we did have things that would growl, but we never did see what was actually emitting the growl. And I will say this, in that area, I personally have seen some big cats, so it is possible that it might have been a big cat in the area. So I'm not going to say that it was, there was a Dogman or a Bigfoot growling at us because of that fact.
You're saying that you don't know whether what was growling at you on those occasions where you couldn't see it was a Dogman or not. You're saying that those growls might have been created by a big cat, but you're saying that what you saw that night on the road when you were out there star watching with your friend, you definitely got a good enough look at that to know that that was a Dogman.
Yeah, definitely. There is no shadow of a doubt. There is no wild animal in this region that is that big.
It sounds like you got a really good look at it. How close did you say you were to it when you encountered it?
I would estimate that it was within 50 yards.
That's still too close for comfort if you're encountering something that big. A Dogman, period. That's not good news. Now, Mark, you were asking yourself the wrong question. I wouldn't worry about whether I could outrun that Dogman. You had your buddy there with you. You only needed to worry about whether you could outrun him, you know?
Yeah, it's, actually, I'm fairly confident that I could have outrun my friends.
Well, you got nothing to worry about, buddy. Even if you couldn't, that's what they created tripping for. Come on now, you know that.
I've always heard that concept, but when you're out there, that's the farthest thing from your mind.
Oh, sure it is.
You're like, let me just get out of here alive.
Now, moving on to your next encounter after that one, how long was it between that encounter with the grizzly-sized Dogman and the next one that you saw?
Okay, let's see. How many? We've gone through 4, right?
That was the third. I guess it was the fourth because you saw the one black one you said at nighttime when you were on quads with your friend, and then shortly after that, you encountered it during the daytime. So that would be 2. And then your third one after that would be the one that had the whitish soil type material on its muzzle. And then this one on the road at night when you were star watching, that would be 4.
You know, I hate to say this, but I've had so many encounters with the strange and odd and just weird stuff that sometimes it's a little bit difficult to keep track of everything.
That's okay, Mark. Let's take a sidetrack for a moment at least. In our conversations, you've made points that I want to be sure that we hit on here in this show.
Okay.
One of the points that you made was that sometimes when you encounter a dogman, they have an unfortunate habit of following you home. Not all the time, but sometimes they do. Could you share your experience with that with the listeners?
Well, actually, with that actual phenomenon, it doesn't isolate itself strictly to the dogman. I've seen that with Bigfoot as well. The area, there for a long time, the area that I was researching in was roughly 10 miles away from where I lived. And after some time researching there were a couple of instances where I did encounter Bigfoot-type creatures here at my home. Now, with respect to the dogman, being that I lived in an area for like I mentioned before, for about a year, I lived in an area, the same area where these things were. It's kind of hard for me to isolate whether it's that they were actually following me home or that they had, had just used that pathway. You know what I'm saying? It's hard to say, whether or not me being there was a factor and then coming through my residence area later on. But I have had instances where out of Bigfoot and Dogman both where they had come through. A couple of things that I had happen, things like knocking on the side of the building, seeing them at the window, and let me tell you, seeing one of these creatures, and it's kind of hard to determine because it's nighttime whether it's actually a Bigfoot or a Dogman that you're looking at through a window. And especially in an area where it's not very well lit, regardless of what it is, it's still very unnerving. And, just a plethora of different things. I've gone out at night and I've heard things that should only be in scary movies. Sounds from some sort of creature in the area that should only be heard in a scary movie. And I know it's not somebody playing a stereo loud because it's obvious that it's outside and it's moving. Am I hitting that one?
Yeah, you are. You are. The kind of sounds you heard, in other words, were the kind of sounds that make you want to just turn right around and head right back in the house.
Let me tell you what, yeah, to say the least. And these are sounds coming, and just to explain to the listeners, I've been investigating Bigfoot reports and stuff like that for many years. I've come into contact with a lot of different recordings. I've heard vocals myself. I've, heard vocalizations from different areas in the U.S. I have never heard anything quite like this. It is something, like I said, the only way I can describe it, there is no way that I can describe this, other than it belongs in a scary movie.
Sounds like it was quite the horror show to hear. Some things are just best not heard, in my opinion. To hit on something that you mentioned earlier, Mark, about the whole An American Werewolf in London comment. Now, when you said to picture what the one that you saw looked like, you said if you took the head of that werewolf from that movie, and just put it on a man's body, that would give you a pretty good idea of what you saw. Now, having said that, have you ever had an encounter that was close enough to the Dogman to be able to get a look at the inside of its mouth? I'm asking you this because someone has mentioned that they saw a certain, in my opinion, very strange trait with the inside of one of these things' mouths. Have you gotten a good look like that?
No, I have not. I'm kind of curious what this trait is.
Well, did you ever get a look at its tongue?
No. In all the things, all of my encounters with everything, I have never seen any of the creatures, any of their tongues.
That's probably a good thing if you're up close and personal and it doesn't open its mouth. That's nothing but a good thing. Now,
is it forked like a snake?
No, it's not forked like a snake. I'm not at liberty.
That would creep me out.
Yeah, that would be, it's already an attention getter, but that would really put things over the top. I'm not at liberty to reveal if you didn't notice it and can't share it yourself. I'm not at liberty right now to reveal that. In the future, I might be at liberty to reveal that though. So we'll just have to unfortunately play that one by ear. Now, if I remember correctly, you did have an encounter, I think you told me in a phone conversation, where you encountered one that was just a matter of feet away from you, correct?
Yes. Now, that's what I was referring to with the area being not well lit. So, being that the one that I encountered that one time, being that it was so jet black, I can, and I hate to assume, but I have nothing else to do, in this particular scenario, because the creature that I was looking at, basically the only thing that I saw was its eye and the skin directly around its eye. And the skin was a real leathery looking black.
Okay.
And it was basically what happened. I was working, doing some work from home, and I was sitting there one evening. It was about 8:30, almost 9 o'clock, between 8:30 and 9. And I had the window curtain open, and I was sitting there at the computer doing some work. And I happened to glance up, and the first time that I glanced up, I could see an airplane in the distance flying across the sky on the horizon. And I just kind of, went back to work, wasn't paying it any mind. And then the next time I looked up, I saw what I thought was a light, but it was stationary, and it was just there. And I looked at it, and I was like, is that an airplane? And then I realized that what I was looking at was not a light at all. I was looking at a reflection of the light from the inside of my living room area. It was reflecting from the eye of this creature.
Oh, wow.
And I was looking at it, and as soon as I realized it, then I could see the black, leathery skin around its eye, and I just kind of looked at it, and I was like, I was thinking to myself, what do I do? Do I even acknowledge it? And it's kind of like we just locked eyes there, or there for a second. I would say maybe 30, 40 seconds even. And then I just kind of looked down, a person's natural response to that, in a lot of cases, is to, if I ignored it, it'll go away kind of thing. Like when you're a kid and you hear something and you think there's a scary monster under your bed, you think that pulling the cover up over you is going to make it go away. Well, I guess my natural response was somewhat similar to that, and it was to look down and maybe it'll go away, and it did, but then after it did, I could hear the dog having a fit, and then I was like, well, I hope the dog does not go after it, this, that, and the other, naturally. And yeah, that experience, it was within 3 feet of me.
I'll tell you what, Mark, that sure sounds like a depends moment to me.
Definitely. I was definitely, and then the thing that was really unnerving about it was that, when I got done working, I had to go outside.
Oh, no.
So imagine that. You're faced with having to go outside after seeing something like that through the window.
Wow, that'd be bad news.
Yeah, needless to say, it was a short trip, and it didn't take me very long.
I could understand why. Wow. Now, you told me that in one of the woods that you visit, you're convinced that there is a dogman or dogmen that basically share the same area where some Sasquatch are. Tell us about that.
Well, what's interesting about that is in this one particular area, and what I find interesting about it is I've seen them basically in the same area, but never together. Like the area where I saw the dogman during the day. I've seen at other times Bigfoot in that same general vicinity, and I know that there are Bigfoot in that area. Some of the later encounters, I know that there are or have been Bigfoot in the same vicinity of basically all of the Dogman encounters that I've had. That at some point or another I've seen, not necessarily in the same exact spot, but within a real close proximity of that spot that I've seen Bigfoot in that area.
If that's the case and they do share some of the same areas, has it been your experience that one type gives way to another when it's present?
I would say most definitely yes. Basically, it's like when the Dogman is around, everything runs and hides. That's including the Bigfoot. I've never seen them together to be able to see what level of interaction they have. I think that it would be interesting to be able to try to document that in some way to see whether there is some sort of hierarchy that exists between them. From my experience and some of the information that I've come across from others leads towards that being a possibility, but nobody's really been able to document it in a way that it's undeniable. So it just leaves a lot of room for questions.
There's so many things we just don't know about them. It's almost a where do you start situation, unfortunately. In closing, Mark, do you have any points you'd like to make about dogmen or researching them in general?
I would say that the most important thing that I could tell anybody is that in researching these creatures, it's very, very important that you have your safety first and foremost as your top priority. A lot of people will tell you, oh, well, Bigfoot's not going to hurt you, or Dogman's not going to hurt you. But the question is this. A lot of people, they ask this question, are there any reports of Bigfoot or Dogman hurting people? That's the wrong question. They're asking the wrong question altogether. The question is, the people that we suspect that they have been harmed by one of these creatures, what happened with that particular situation? Because of the simple fact that there are cases where it's suspected that these creatures are involved. To what degree, we don't know, because the investigative agencies that are overseeing these things, for whatever reason, they don't feel it necessary to release that information to the public. But there is hearsay and things that get related from person to person that lead towards the possibility of a human attack by one of these creatures. It is possible. So, in saying that, never research alone.
Hitting on your point about the whole, just because we don't have any confirmed cases of people being attacked by dogmen, that's no guarantee it hasn't happened. Exactly, I agree. If someone's killed by one and never has a chance to tell their story, then how would we know about that? So, yeah, there's no guarantee that something like that hasn't happened, just because an instance like that hasn't been confirmed. Having said all that, Mark, I really want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing those great encounters with us and all the great knowledge. I really do appreciate it.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Thanks again. I know I'll see you around. Please don't be a stranger.
I will definitely see you again in the future.
That sounds good. Well, thanks again for coming on, buddy, and you have yourself a great night.
You too, thank you.
Thanks, we'll see you.
Bye.
Bye.